Well, good evening, and welcome to McFarland's Economic Development Forum. I believe you'll find this evening to be informative and thought-provoking. We've assembled a panel from the public, private, and educational sectors, a cross-section of stakeholders who have an interest in McFarland's local economy and who are willing to share their experiences, knowledge, and best practices. The forum is a tremendous opportunity to hear and discuss opinions, news, and information related to the challenges and priorities facing the sustainable development of McFarland. This is our chance to learn about the trends and dynamics occurring in and around the McFarland area and how this may impact our community. Now, economic development is important to McFarland for a variety of reasons. It's important to improve our economic well-being by retaining our current businesses and attracting new ones. It's important to enhance our quality of life. And economic development is important to facilitate growth in order to provide a stable tax base. As our community evolves, it demands fresh ideas and inspired solutions. We are beginning to see signs of an economic recovery, and this is a prime time to hold this type of discussion. As village president, there's probably one question that I'm asked more than any other, and that is, what's happening with the McFarland Center? Is anything going to be done about it? And believe me when I say there are as many opinions on this topic as there are village residents. Well, the good news is that we may be seeing some movement in this area. The True Value is planning on relocating to the McFarland Center in 2014. And that's great news. However, our challenges run deeper than just that storefront. On Highway 51 and on Farwell Street from Highway 51 through our downtown area, we have many vacancies. And the TIF district in our downtown area is struggling. So how do we improve this situation? How can we attract the small businesses to help McFarland thrive? Well, we're here tonight to benefit from the expertise of the panel members and try to find answers to these questions. At this time, I'd like to introduce Ken Brost, who will serve as our moderator this evening. Ken is a member of the Community Development Authority, and he'll introduce our panel members. Ken is pinch hitting for Tom Hansen, who had an unexpected call away. So thanks, Ken, for sitting in.
I'm Ken Brost, and Tom Hansen called me last night and said he was going to be going to Washington today. So I asked him if he was there to fix the healthcare.gov, and he said no, he heard somebody else was working on that. But he really wanted to be here, but fortunately he wrote down some stuff here so I can stand in for him. The way this is going to work is each of the panelists is going to be given, I'll introduce each one as they're going to speak. They're going to talk for a couple minutes, and then we'll move on. And at the end, save all your questions for the end for all of the panelists so that they can get through their portion and we'll be ready. What the objectives of the economic forum? What can the village do to create more opportunities? Are there improvements that can be made that will result in expanded economic development? And I would like to thank the 7 panelists to provide us insights. So first of all, it's Rob Call, State Assembly and former Mayor of Monona, and Pat Marsh, Administrator of the City of Monona. And if you two want to join together for your few minutes.
Sure, that'll work. We've worked together enough that I think we can swing this. My apologies, I was actually in Fitchburg, another part of the district, my assembly district, meeting with the mayor there on, ironically, economic development, and then the Beltline did not cooperate on my way over here. We had an accident out there and turned into a parking lot versus a freeway. I think I'm here to talk from a couple different perspectives. Former mayor of Monona, and I was also the chair of our CDA for a couple of years after I was done being mayor. And then now I've got about a year under my belt representing you in the state assembly. And what I really focused on when I was mayor and then CDA chair, and what I've continued to focus on in the state assembly, is economic development and job creation. And not just any jobs, good jobs. It's important that these be jobs that can support a family, people that are able to afford a home, give back to the community, and really be full participants in the community. And the tools that we utilized in Monona heavily relied upon TIF. And we, over the years, had to sometimes get fairly aggressive with, I don't know that we ever actually utilized eminent domain, but we were in the process and on the verge when we worked out some deals. And that's not easy, it's difficult, but if you want to actually see some development through, sometimes that's the path you have to take. And I think if you asked our citizens in hindsight, that they would think that the decisions we've made as mayor and city council and our CDA in Monona were the right decisions. I took the lead from Tom Metcalf, my predecessor, who was himself in the private development besides owning Metcalf's Groceries, and was quite aggressive in how we approached redevelopment in Monona. And I took the lead from Tom, and our current mayor, Bob Millers, I think carried that and done the same. And Bob was previously our CDA chair before becoming mayor. So when I look at McFarland, I see a lot of similarities to what we encountered when I first got on the council in Monona, which was 2001, and then I became mayor in 2003. And what you need to really examine is where your opportunities are, but where mostly with a community like this, where your challenges are, and those challenges are redevelopment. Like I said, I just left Fitchburg. It's a very different atmosphere in Fitchburg. I mean, there it's a lot of new development. There's very little that has to be redeveloped. There's a lot of vacant land and a lot of high-tech development, et cetera. So the issues that I deal with out there and trying to help them pursue some opportunities are much different than Monona and McFarland, which I see as quite similar. Along with, frankly, the east side of Madison here, where along Stoughton Road, where I represent that, we've got some similar challenges. We utilized TIF and used that tool to spur the economic development. I think that everybody would say is quite successful, and it is quite successful, that you see along Broadway and Monona Drive. But the other important aspect that we pushed was infrastructure, the drive itself, Broadway itself. You have to understand from the perspective of business owners, they are reluctant to make an investment in their property if they don't see you as a community investing in the infrastructure at the end of their driveway. And in Monona, I think it goes without saying, Monona Drive was obviously a thoroughfare that was struggling. It was in desperate need of repair, and we utilized a lot of tools working with the state and federal government, City of Madison, Dane County, to get a great deal of funding for that project. But we also utilized TIF. The city had to borrow very little because we were able to utilize TIF borrowing from one district to another. And we also then created programs under our TIF for, obviously, I think people think of TIF developments as these large economic developments, and that's the case many times. If you look at our Meritor, UW Clinic, the development behind Ken's Meat and Deli, which used to be a very challenged garden circle, residential development, and so forth. But we also do a facade improvement program where businesses, and I look at Tully's, a restaurant on Monona Drive, Taco John's, get, let's say $5,000 to $10,000, but they themselves are investing about $40,000 to get that money, and they're increasing their property value. So there's different variations on TIF that you can utilize to encourage economic development, from the very minor to obviously the very significant. But unless you're aggressive in pursuing that, it's not generally going to come to you. What we did was work with our lenders based in the community, but other outside lenders, and also the developers, which there's plenty in the Dane County area. Be careful, pick the good ones. The commercial realtors, Lee and Associates are a prime example that we work with quite a bit. And we now have, I think, quarterly meetings with them, or breakfast meetings, this open house to talk about economic development opportunities. I used to just call them up and go meet with them, and you need to do that kind of stuff and utilize this tool. Now, there's some proposed amendments on TIF that I can touch on later up at the Capitol. Some, I think, could be beneficial to McFarland, and others I don't know that will really impact you at all. But the current tools in place, frankly, are more than enough. But you have to get your board buy-in, get the CDA and your board on the same page, which was a struggle when I first came on board to make sure we were doing, and get the community on board. You just can't go out and do some of these aggressive developments without educating the community. Like I said, we bought millions of dollars worth of property that was a challenged residential area known as Garden Circle. Well, it was a huge drain on our police and EMS services. It was driving down the property values of the surrounding businesses, et cetera. It was a tough political decision to make, but we made sure we got the buy-in from the public beforehand, and now, a few years down the road, it's a hugely successful development. And obviously, all these things are going to increase your property tax base, but they're also going to improve the quality of life in your community. Now, like I said, McFarland I see is quite similar to Monona. You're not landlocked like Monona is, but you've got that infill redevelopment need. And there are some key uses that are looking for those type of locations because of the access to the potential clientele. Senior housing is a prime example. That may be, some of these spots we've talked about on, that Brad talked about on Farwell and others might be ideal for that. So it's something where, you've got to have that communication with the public. And you also need to be a little bit more aggressive potentially than you have been in the past. I think, we started it in Monona with Mayor Metcalf, carried it on from there. I think Fitchburg has shown to be quite aggressive, again, in some different circumstances, but when they had an idea for development to the east side of town, they approached DOT and paid for the on-off ramps on Highway 14, Park Street there, which has now spurred tens of millions of dollars of development. That development doesn't happen without that infrastructure. It doesn't happen without that access. You talk to business owners, their top 2 or 3 besides quality personnel is always going to be access, transportation access. So you've got that with 51, but like Monona Drive, that brings some other challenges. You want to actually try to slow traffic down sometimes to actually see the businesses you have. We wanted to do that on Monona Drive. You don't really have the visibility from the Beltline that Monona enjoys, but you've got a potential opportunity with the new interstate expansion coming to the east. Looking that direction is something that I guess you should really seriously think about. I know we've had some discussions here about that and what I can do to help at the state level. But those are all a lot of, I've touched on a lot there, but the bottom line is you've got to have that partnership between your lending community, your commercial developer / real estate community, your elected officials, your CDA, that you go as a unified front when you approach your citizenry to tell them your plan. Because if there's not that uniformed acceptance of what the plan is, it'll crumble apart. I've seen it happen too often. And that means everybody's going to have to compromise a little bit to figure out what that unified plan is. Pat, I don't know what I missed there. But
You did a good job covering a lot of the points that I have written down here too, Rob.
I was reading off your sheet.
Yeah. As Representative Call mentioned, Mayor Metcalf preceded him, and Bob Miller has followed him as mayor. And we're very fortunate in Monona to have those 3 mayors have sort of laid the groundwork for the development we're seeing right now. Obviously, Monona Drive didn't happen overnight. I believe planning began for that in the 90s initially. 90s. Mm-hmm. And road construction originally was supposed to kick off in the early 2000s, and then eventually kicked off in 5 years ago. So, and we're just now seeing almost the completion of that roadway. And as was mentioned, that's really a catalyst for all of the development, all the interest we're seeing in Monona is the investment we made as a community, as a region, working with Madison, working with Dane County, working with our neighbors, to see that project completed next spring. It will be totally complete, and we'll move on to the next thing. But, you know, I have two things really highlighted here for my discussion tonight. Number one is investment. Your community has to be invested in what you're doing, and you need to do that financially, as was mentioned. The second is buy-in. You really, without getting buy-in from the residents of your community, the businesses, obviously the other elected officials, mayors can't do it without councils getting involved, and you need good community development authorities, you need good plan commissions who are going to work with developers, with property owners, things along those lines. This sort of thing really just doesn't happen. We've sort of hit almost the perfect storm in Monona where things are really coming together at the same time the economy hopefully is starting to rebound. And I'll just tell you from my perspective, I receive at least 2 or 3 calls every week about a potential redevelopment. And in a community the size of Monona, equal to the size of McFarland, you can imagine that's significant, very significant. But it was the groundwork and the things that have been laid forth in the previous years and the planning and the building of that buy-in by the whole community that's got us to where we're at today. Representative Call mentioned, you know, a few things, but I'm just going to go into a little bit more detail on a few things. One is the facade program. We do matching grants for our businesses within the TID districts on Monona Drive, not to exceed $10,000, but as was mentioned by Representative Call, they, in most cases, will invest $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 of their own money to get the $10,000 in city money. You can see that's a great investment for the city. We're seeing, you know, a higher tax base with higher property values, and, you know, just the improvement of one property generally leads to the improvement of others. So that stuff really is good stuff. The streetscaping, we just didn't, the leaders of Monona didn't just envision redoing the road. We envisioned redoing the road that businesses and that residents would want to live on. You know, it has beautiful streetscaping, lighting, stone walls, the banners, friendly to pedestrians, friendly to bicyclists, the people that you really make, you know, we're not fortunate enough in Monona to have a downtown. Monona Drive is our downtown, but it brings that pedestrian feel to Monona Drive that wasn't there before, having the cyclists and the walkers. Businesses are putting up bike racks to accommodate them, things like that, so that's really great. One other key point I want to mention, and then we'll be able to move on here, but from my perspective as a staff person, it's when I'm dealing with businesses, I want to be as accommodating as possible to them, and I want our staff at City Hall. We have a great group of department heads, but we're working on trying to improve processes. How do we make it easy for businesses to do business with the city of Monona? How do we facilitate plans through a quicker planning commission process, a review process? How do we facilitate them at CDA meetings and city council meetings? The way we do it in Monona, and this I started as the administrator there under Rob, is we literally go out of our way to accommodate business. We'll call special meetings. We'll meet with business owners at 7 in the morning for a cup of coffee. That includes myself and the mayors. We'll meet in the evening if need be. But you have to go out of your way if you're going to make something like this work. You have to work on their schedule, you have to be accommodating, and you have to show you want them here in your community.
Thank you. Next panelist is Jim Walker, Executive Vice President, McFarland State Bank.
Good evening. McFarland State Bank, we this year in 2014 we'll be celebrating our 110 years in McFarland. So we've been in McFarland and we've been here helping small business for a long time. Right now we have about over $500 million in loans that we're servicing. Pauline asked me to talk a little bit also about the commercial real estate environment, so I'll just kind of gel it in with what I'm going to talk about. The environment to lend money today is much stronger than it was 3, 4, 5 years ago when the recession began. Along with those lines, the real estate market has also improved this last 2 years. We are lending. We do have money available to lend. However, due to the last 5 years, the regulatory environment that banks now live in has become much more difficult. And to that end, Pauline and I have talked quite often about how we can help with that situation with, for example, 5 years ago, we would do a lot of lending with under speculation for commercial buildings that a developer would go out and build a building and they will come. In today's world, the regulatory environment that I live in, we can't do that anymore. We have to have some pre-leasing done. We have to have some pre-sales done. That's where the TIFs come in. That's where the other CDA help can come in and help us with those situations. Borrowers also need to have some cash into their deals. And again, that's where the TIF money can help with those situations because sometimes it is difficult to come up with the cash they need to get a project off the ground. The bank has, we have a lot of incentive to want to be involved in a lot of the infrastructure redevelopments going on. Brad mentioned the True Value. We are working with Brian Spangler right now to hopefully put a deal together for him to move his store down to the old McFarland Center. I think it'd be a great move for him. Then it also opens up another building there for some other form of redevelopment that can go in there along with the empty lot next to it that Tom Gannon owns. So we're involved in that. We're involved in, there's between Walgreens and the animal hospital, there's another site there that we're involved with that developer. Again, his struggle is he needs to have some pre-leasing done before he can move in there. So we're trying to work with him to maybe build part of a building or whatever we can do to help him get something going there to bring something to that site. It's a great site right on Highway 51. Over on Vogus Road, there's a couple properties over there that are in redevelopment. Same situation. We've got some buildings going up on one of the sites, and there's some very good prospects for another large user to go on a couple of those sites there. So, and we're involved in that. The real estate market, I've got several of my developers. Rental-wise, again, they're full. They don't have a lot of space available right now, so they need to build buildings and provide space for people who want to come to McFarland. But we need to find a way to come together with the city, or the village, and the bank, and put those packages together for those people. So.
Thank you. Next is Scott Brown, Superintendent, McFarland School District, and Jeff Mahoney, Director of Business and Technology Service for McFarland School District.
Thank you, Ken, and welcome everyone. Thank you for coming out this evening and showing interest in your community. Excuse my voice, I'm still recovering from a little bit of a cold. I wanted to say, first of all, that this meeting is very personal for me. This is my 22nd year of living in McFarland. This is where I moved my family, and my children have gone to this school and worked in this community. And I think this is a really important step, and it's really interesting for me to hear a lot of the different perspectives and things that are going on. And the school has a kind of a unique role in the situation in McFarland. And some of the folks I brought along tonight can help explain or answer questions if there are some from the group. Jeff Mahoney, our business manager, is here, and he'll touch in a moment a little bit on some of the enrollment trends that we see. And Cindy Brady, our school to work coordinator here, really touches a lot of areas that relate to our businesses and the community and the things we do. But just by way of, I think, overview, I think our district is in good shape for drawing people to our community. We hear of people who want to move here, especially now that almost half our grades are filled up with open enrollment. Folks can't get in through open enrollment anymore. Our enrollment of our actual McFarland students is made up to fill our buildings with open enrollment students, and Jeff will talk about that a little bit. And we generally have a fair number of waiting lists of people who want to come to our community. Our School to Work program, which includes our business and education partnership, the work of Cindy, as well as everything from Project Lead the Way, our innovative work in trying to find and develop kids to go into the engineering and automotive fields, is at this point doing quite well. One thing that we have, I think, as like my two, I think, concerns or things that I'd like to share with you. In 1998, this community made a significant investment in McFarland schools. I do not believe we would be in the position we are with open enrollment and with people wanting to come to our district if we had the same school and the same setup we had in 1993. I think it really relates to what Representative Call said about Monona. You have to be willing to invest in infrastructure to produce buildings and opportunities and places where kids can learn, especially in the tech ed area. There has to be a perception that your schools physically are up to date. And then you have to have the programs to fill those facilities that people hear about, that you're doing good things and produce the results. And then people want to be, a part of our district. Right now, I think we're, in many ways, have that characteristic as a district, and that's good news. But I think, 15 years later, after 1998, we're going to approach a crossroads again, which is, when you look at the neighboring communities, when you look at Monona or wherever you want to go, and you want to move to a community and have your kids educated, what auditorium do you want to see your children have a play into? What facility are you looking for your children to be involved in extracurricular or co-curricular activities? So I think that's important. Programming-wise, we're going to keep our eye on the prize. We're going to try to focus on where kids need to be when they graduate and what we can do. And community-wise, we want to be a good partner. And we feel in that area we can always try to do more, keeping our kids more involved in volunteer efforts, getting them into our businesses through Cindy's placement. I don't think many people know, there's kind of two interesting statistics. In Dane County, as far as open enrollment goes, as a percentage of total students, we would lead Dane County. Over 300 students come here from other districts. And in terms of placement of students within businesses and jobs throughout Dane County, but also within McFarland, McFarland places students that far exceed districts that are double our size in Dane County. So we have a very effective program to be able to place students. So we're proud of what we're doing. We want to be a part of any efforts to improve our community. We'll miss the occasional free parking lot across the way, but there'd be nothing more happy for us than to see Farwell Street develop in an excellent way right down to the school district. And we'd love to lose the title of the largest employer in McFarland. We think there are other businesses out there that could someday take that role from us. So that's not a role that we covet or seek at all. So with that, I'll give it to Jeff to talk a little bit about open enrollment, and then I'll also give Cindy, if she would, just maybe a brief opportunity to hit the highlights of what her job involves.
Thanks, Scott. And I think some other points to bring up about the McFarland School District, because I don't see a lot of these familiar faces at our annual meetings,
Right.
which is sometimes a good sign as well. But, you know, we're a $28 million operation, well into about 300 plus employees, of which you have a covered wages of, you know, over $14 million. Many of our employees live here in the McFarland School District. They're buying homes, they're buying locally. Those that don't are purchasing after work. So, you know, as Scott talks about, you know, being the largest employer, you know, these people throughout the day, if they have opportunities or after work, have opportunities to utilize the businesses. The corridors that have been spoken about, the 51 and Farwell, you know, our employees, you know, travel down those paths and that. So it is important to have the infrastructure in place and opportunities for people to go have dinner after work or be able to, we get a lot of people that comment that now they can go eat outside after work, and some of our teams start to meet instead of going elsewhere. They're going and meeting with groups outside after school, you know, at some of the establishments that now have the outdoor seating. People like to be outside, especially when they've been inside with kids, you know, all day. There's a, you know, you might want to get away from 25 kids after a while. We're certainly a district that's been fortunate to have open enrollment. We're a district that, you know, back in 2008, 2009, had about 1,971 resident students. We're projecting in 5 years, we're going to be, you know, down into the 1800s. So right now, what matters to the McFarland School District when it comes to the economic side of operating it, it's based on students. Real estate talks about location, location, location. We talk about students, students, students. We want triplets, you know, from everybody. And that's key because how we're funded is completely based off of the student. A challenge for us, as wonderful it is to have students coming from other school districts, it's a challenge because when they're a resident student, our funding is closer to $10,500. A student coming from Madison, Stoughton, Oregon brings funding of $6,500. It's difficult, and it becomes more of a gap of something that we have to be concerned about how can we operate our facilities and all of our programs when there's a difference of about $4,000 in funding. And as we grow past 13% of our enrollment under open enrollment, that certainly will be one of our challenges. As Scott mentioned, we have wonderful programming that draws people. If we have more developers wanting to look at residential, single family, we know that people will come along. Many of our open enrollment families, we don't have a statistic on it, and I can't throw something at it, but a lot of our families will come here under open enrollment and they will move. Once housing becomes available, they're trying to sell their homes, Madison, Stoughton, other areas, and locate in McFarland. So we have a lot going for us, and we have been supported by this community immensely.
Just as I said, we're one of the unusual things about our district is having someone like Cindy Brady, who is our school to work coordinator, and then works with our business and education partnership throughout the district, as well as Project Lead the Way and our technical field teams within our district. So Cindy, just very briefly, I know people are cognizant of their time, but just share a little bit about what we have going on there.
Notice he said briefly. Apparently he knows what I can do. Actually, I have the best job in the district. We are so fortunate here to, one, have a community that supports our schools so strongly, but also to have a school board administration that supports what we do in the schools. Our goal is the college and career readiness for our students, and each of those are very important components. All of our students will end up, they'll start at the 8th grade level working toward an academic and career plan. Again, that's that career plan also. So we're working toward the academics. What do they need for the academics, but also what's their goal? and how can we help them reach their goal? Because our job does not end at the door. It's not just to prepare them for graduation. And for all of you who have either worked with tuition costs or will be looking at tuition costs in the future, you can rest assured that our goal is our students will leave with an idea of what they want to do. So they're not spending time, money, effort finding that out after they graduate. One of the things that we do offer, one of the things that our students do, they all create a portfolio as they're going through their years of high school. Who are they? Where are they going? What are their goals? And each student, each senior will sit down before graduation, the week before, and sit with a couple of interviewers, and several of you here have been interviewers for that opportunity, and we're always looking for volunteers. Let me know if you'd like to be a part of it. But find out from the students, what's your next step? What are you doing? Why are you choosing that? And it's a great dialogue that's reflective for the student as well. Another of the areas that we're strong in is with our work-based learning. How better for a student to figure out what that next step is than to work on some employability skills before they leave. Some of our students have jobs, and they get credit for it. And again, those employability skills, all those things you know are important, they're building those skills while they're still in high school. That's the work experience. But we also have youth apprenticeship. Those are for the students that really think they have the goal. Maybe it's nursing. Maybe it's the auto mechanic, the auto tech. Maybe it's in the welding area or biotech. Our students will leave school grounds and have positions, paid positions in those areas. They will know by the time they graduate whether they want to be a part of that or they so do not want to be part of that for their life. We can offer that for our students, which again is through the support, and again that helps with our economic development as well. We have many other opportunities, Career Day, Reality Zone, that we're involved with as well. Again, volunteers, let me know. We'd love to have you there. We do have the strong schools. We're working toward preparing our students for those jobs that have strong skills. There's a demand for them. They're high wage, the types of jobs that you want your own children to be a part of. So we're preparing our students for the careers. We're also supplying that workforce as well for the business community here. And anything else that we can do, we know that strong schools are going to pull people in, and that's our goal as well. And again, any other questions you have for me, be sure to let me know, because we love community involvement. That's what keeps us going in so many aspects of our school.
Thank you, Ken. As the business organization here in McFarland, our primary goal is to serve and support the roughly 125 business members that we have in our organization. But further than that, we also work to foster a strong relationship with both the community and its residents. Most of you are probably familiar with us through the events that we host throughout the year. Our biggest one is coming up in December with Christmas in the Village. But we also hold a Firecracker 5,000 run in the summer, and we try and reach out to residents in other ways through programs such as our new resident welcome bags that we give out through both our chamber office and local businesses. Really, from what we've seen from the chamber's perspective is that the general sense is that there's increased business activity going on, not just in McFarland, but in the general area. A lot of what we've seen is mostly small retail, though, and a lot of sole proprietor, owner, operated type businesses. As far as what we're seeing further, though, is more redevelopment and reinvestment by businesses that are already here. Perhaps most noticeable among that is the new Quick Trip redesign that was opened last month. And in addition to that, Culver's has recently made renovations to the interior. So for our organization, the long-term goal is really to how can we develop not just a service to the business community, but really serve in a tourism and a role where we can help draw new people to McFarland, not just residents, but really a way to draw new dollars into the community, either through our events or through some revitalization in the business community. And I think the key to that is really developing a better relationship with the village. prior to my getting involved with the chamber, I know that there was some disconnect between the business community and the village, but I think on both ends, we've made great strides in building that relationship. We've had sit-down talks with village trustees, the village president. We have membership on our board of directors from both the village and the school district. So really, I think facilitating that communication and opening those lines will really kind of help us move the business community forward. And in the end, I think we want to serve in a role where we're not just supporting businesses, but how can we help serve as a recruitment tool for new businesses, particularly job-generating type businesses where we can actually bring new residents into McFarland. So in terms of that, part of our vision is how do we turn this community into a destination as well. I know we partnered with the CW network here. 7 of our business members participated in a marketing campaign called Destination McFarland that has aired on local television. But really the goal should be how do we take that effort and turn McFarland into a destination where we're encouraging new people to come to the village and see McFarland as more than just a pass-through on 51. You know, our fear is that a lot of the retail development has been out on the highway corridor. How do we reinvigorate our downtown area and draw more visitors into the center of the city? So, you know, we're open to any discussions on that in terms of how to renovate the downtown. But, you know, I really do echo what Mr. Marsh and Representative Call said. You know, any way that we can build that relationships, help build the business community, and make it easier for businesses to do business. Any way that as an organization we can help facilitate that, I think will help McFarland for the future. So.
Thank you, Tim. Next is Bill Barker, McFarland House Cafe, and Ann's here for moral support.
Good, I need that moral support.
I told him I don't talk after 5.
That's right. No more coffee for her. Thank you. We moved here 10 years ago. I was transferred from Portland, Oregon, and we looked around all over the Madison area where to move. And we did all our homework and everything. And we moved here specifically for the schools, because we had 3 little kids that were going to use and abuse McFarland School District, and it's turned out fantastic. We had a dream to open a community cafe for, well, we were in Portland. And, you know, the opportunity came up. Unfortunately, it came up in 2009 during the depths of the worst recession in 75 years. Stuck our neck out, and it's worked. We brought traffic downtown. You know, Steve Washa through the TIF District for a new time there helped, you know, get that place up and going. So we've been very fortunate. What we would like to see now is this TIF District pushed. We believe that, and I heard that, you know, Monona was unfortunate because they didn't have a downtown area. You know, we do. We just don't utilize it. And it really is my belief that a downtown area like that can be the heart and soul of this community. And that's what it's all about, is trying to tie people up, you know, for the better good of the village. Ask any 3rd grader who's, you know, for the past 5 years, who's went on the history tours of the village. They know everything about the village. Their parents probably don't, but they do. And they show pride, you know, it's that Spartan pride. Dodie Keel's kindergarten class for the 5 years comes in and creates a marketing strategy for the kindergarten creation, you know. These kids remember that, and now we're seeing college kids come back and meet their friends and have their cup of coffee and reminisce. So it's really a pretty cool thing. The #1 reason why, though, and I just saw an example of this, was we have a group of adults come in every Friday for coffee, and one of the guys' wife had been sick for 20 plus years with cancer. Well, she passed away last May, and we got a bench, and it's called Celia's Bench, and we put it out front. That's really not the story. The story is we bought that bench at an auction for the community garden. And you can see how we're all tied together. And that's what we love. That community garden, your wife has got to be, she's relentless. That thing was absolutely exhausted. She's exhausting. I mean, an unbelievable success 1 year. Those are the things we're talking about. What we want from the village board, is we need the cheerleader. We need the initiative. We need the push. We need the marketing. You know, what is McFarland? What's our logo? What do we stand for? Infrastructure, you know, it's not going to take what it took in Monona, but we are going to need some. And with that, there's risk involved. But if we get on board and get people together and push, we can do it. And once we can start getting that going, then the village can, you know, then developers, investment people are going to take the reins, because they're going to see that, you know, this is for real. They're smart. They're not going to put their neck out on a limb like we did. You know, but we just got to show them. And appreciate everyone's time. Thanks.
Thank you. Now, are there any questions of any of the panel from reviewers? I don't cover it all.
Rob, do you have any updates on any new TIF legislation that you would like to bring up that's happened recently?
Sure. There's quite a few bills floating around out there. I'm not sure where they're going to go, because I think there's some disagreement in the Republican caucus. But there's a tech park TIF district, and we can send you the summary if we haven't already, to the looking at a couple of staff guys in the back, that would allow for TIFs to be created by tech parks, and there's a definition for that. Right now, cities and villages can create TIFs. There's a law to allow towns to create TIFs. And there's been some specific towns, coincidentally in Republican districts, that have been earmarked to allow to do that. Now they're talking about doing that across the board. There's a TIF light bill, I think it's called, where it wouldn't include the school portions of the TIF in the TIF district, and I think it would only be about 12 years long. That's just some insider baseball. I mean, you would understand it, but for the general public, it just shortens the term, but it treats the schools a little bit differently. There's a redetermination proposal for Department of Revenue to come in for TIFs that are struggling. And some TIFs will struggle. I mean, it wasn't all rosy in Monona. We shut down a TIF over at Southtown, right, by Viridian. That's all Monona. I don't know if people realize that. And it struggled. And you know, you can carry your TIFs with other TIFs. They can lend money to the other, et cetera. But at some point in time, you get a fish or cut bait, and that one we shut it down. But I think there's some now new activity happening there that may prompt the creation of a new TIF. Who knows? But they're not all successful. And especially in the economy the last few years, this has been a struggle from a valuation standpoint. So this is some corrective language to address that. And there's also one that you may not like. It's got a great title. It's a transparency bill, and a TIF early closure and transparency bill, I think, is the full title. Well, it sounds good, but I think there's some details that we're going to have to work through. Because it's going to require a lot of paperwork from municipalities, some annual reports, in addition to what you already have to do with revenue. And again, we'll send this out to you folks, the summaries that Eric's put together in my office. But some good things, though. It allows some additional project costs that weren't allowed before. as far as cost for municipality to recruit a new business can now be a TIF expense under this bill. To remodel the interiors of existing buildings, that could be a TIF expense. That's currently not allowed. And that's something it sounds like here might be a benefit. And the other one was to allow parking structures, which are already allowed, but in Madison, because it has a parking utility, they couldn't TIF. They still can't. The law is not in place. So I had that placed into this bill. I've also got it put into a Department of Revenue corrections bill, just a cleanup bill. So hopefully it will happen one way or the other. But as you can imagine, Madison, downtown Madison, which I don't represent, but they asked me to help them out because of my business background and my background being a mayor, has all these parking garages where they'd like to put that parking underground and develop on top of that. And when you can't TIF that type of project cost, it makes it pretty difficult to do. Then there's going to be, in that bill, a change to the 12% test, where if you grade out at a certain level, you can go to a 15%. And again, this is a lot of insider baseball for those of you at home. There's some allowing of sharing of TIFs. Like I said, you can share between TIFs right now. They would allow it to be shared between the environmental remediation tax districts. I don't know if you have any remediation areas here that would be attractive to that. I know in Monona there's potentially one. And folks may think of big old gas stations, brownfields like that. It could be a former site of a dry cleaning facility. You'd be surprised at what soil contamination you have if a dry cleaning site was there prior. And like I said, allowing towns to create TIFs is another one. So there's a lot out there, and the author of those, Chad Weidinger from Green Bay, I've worked with quite a bit. If there's some specific ideas from the Dane County cities and villages, let me know. They've been very accommodating to me to make amendments on some of this stuff. Given I've built a pretty good working relationship and also the background I have as a former mayor and CDA member. If I could, I've heard some great things here, and you do have an outstanding school district here. I mean, I'm so impressed. I have students from McFarland School District come more than any of the other. I have 7 school districts, and more than any other districts, I have students from McFarland job shadow me, visit, come down, take a real acute interest in learning about state government. It's very impressive. That is one of the huge attractions for this community. Just like in Monona Grove School District, it's a huge reason people want to come there. And frankly, the high school is an anchor at the other end of Monona Drive that we've utilized for trying to spur redevelopment at the other end of Monona Drive. So don't take that asset for granted. You've got it in a location that could help out other development in that area of Farwell. The other thing I want to point out is we keep talking about what we've done through TIF for businesses, et cetera. We also started, when I was mayor, and the first community in the state to do it, others may have done it now, is a program called Renew Monona, where homeowners can get loans from TIFs. 0% interest loans, pay it back when you refinance or sell. But it's all built on this concept of, if you build it, they will come. If you make it an attractive community, people want to be here. And it's not just the businesses, it's not just the streetscape, like Pat said. That's where I had some pushback from council members, community members, the stone walls, the flags, the particular lighting we did, et cetera. But in my mind, we had to do that to create the new image for Monona. Somebody talked about, does McFarland have a logo, et cetera. We created a committee to come up with a branding, create a new committee just to do that and for family attraction, to partner with our business community, our chamber for business attraction. Like I said, I can't say it enough. You have to be aggressive. And you have to go out there and get these folks. But we do this Renew Monona program, and it's been wildly successful. And so now you not only see people investing in their businesses using the facade program, we see all these. It used to be just the lake property being torn down and rebuilt or remodeled. Now it's homes in parts of the city where those homes haven't been touched in decades that are being rebuilt, utilizing this program, which we partner with Monona State Bank, WPS Bank, et cetera. That's how we run that program. And it's wildly successful, and you need the consumers to ideally live here that are going to go to the businesses you want to attract here. I mean, when we recruited Meritor, one of the things we talked to them about was, we're going to introduce all your employees to this program, the Renew Monona program, because we want those nurses, those doctors, those physical therapists, et cetera, to consider living here. Those are good paying jobs. And it's worked. So you need, like I said, to be aggressive. These new programs, there's some that could maybe benefit the village. There's a lot of WEDIC programs out there. WEDIC's gotten a bad rap because they've done some pretty stupid things. Losing track of millions of dollars is not the best way to start off an organization like that. And WEDIC is Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, replaced our state commerce department. But I just met with a business on Stoughton Road in the city of Madison and WEDIC, and the tax credits available for job creation, the low interest loans, it's about 2% interest right now, on a fully state-funded program so that the village wouldn't have to do that, or you can do it in partnership with a TIF. There's a lot of things you can do out there, and this business came to me for a different reason. Then I found out they were looking at having 150 jobs created the next year. They might put those in Bowling Green, Kentucky, or they might want to keep them here. So we turned around in less than a week, and I think they're going to stay here now. I'm quite confident because we provided them some options. And that's beyond what I'm trying to get the city of Madison to do there too. So there are other tools besides just city-focused TIF. There's obviously particular bonding you can do here. There are state programs that we can help out with. I'd also encourage you, I don't know if are you solely Alliant service area here, or are you MG&E and Alliant? Both? Okay. In Monona, it's MG&E, and each has their own economic development arms. They will throw, if it's a good investment, money in partnership with the community to do redevelopment plans and to help attract businesses. Because guess what? New businesses go up. What do those businesses need to run? They need power. So it's in their interest. They have whole staffs to do this, to encourage economic development. So there are various partnerships that you need to be looking at. But one last thing I'll say is, when I first, Pat said now he gets 2 or 3 calls a week. That wasn't happening when I came on board. I was making 2 or 3 calls a week. You got to go chase these folks down. And what I would hear from realtors, developers, et cetera, is when I was talking about trying to get residents into the community, is look, you can't get them past your front door. Our front door being Monona Drive. And it's kind of like trying to sell a house, and there's a car up on blocks with a weedy lawn, shutters falling off, et cetera. It could be great inside, but people aren't going to get past that appearance. So we did those extra things. I think everybody knows our sales now, and we put some additional lighting on that, signage, so forth. To get people to we don't have a downtown, we have a city center, the pool, the community center, the city hall, the library, and so forth. To make this thing successful, you've got to get them in the front door. And right now, you need to think long and hard, what is the first thing folks see when they come into McFarland? And what is it you can maybe do to improve that image? It could be small things. And we started putting those flags up on our light posts on Broadway. I did that without even talking to the council, candidly. I just told Pat, go buy some, start doing this before we get the Monona Drive project underway. We have to start identifying ourselves. Sense of pride for your community, your residents and your businesses. It means a lot, and it's a minor investment, but it's the whole penny wise, pound foolish thing. Because there was a bunch of people telling us, just repave this road. You don't need to do new lights, including a former mayor. You don't need to do all this stone signage. I mean, Pat heard it, and you get the public on your side, you push back, and you educate about why it's important to make that investment. Just like you all make investments in your homes and your businesses. You do it for a reason. But you've got some great foundations here, starting with the school district. And starting with your location, let's all be honest. We're in Dane County. You're right off the Beltline. Close proximity to the interstate. If you decide to make that investment like Fitchburg did to build access to that road. They did it to Highway 14. It's the whole, if you build it, they will come. So you got to make the investment, though. You got to pursue it. They're not going to come. Now they're coming to Monona. They're calling Pat. Like I said, that wasn't the case 6, 8 years ago. We were the ones making the calls. But it works if you make the investment. And it frankly, is a lot of, if you're successful in your TIF developments, it offsets your need to borrow. It offsets your levy. It reduces your taxes. This is a great tool. It's not the only tool, but it's a great tool. And it's one that, if you utilize it correctly, it can be a win-win situation for everybody, including the schools.
I have a question on the infrastructure, because McFarland had actually done the infrastructure improvements on Powell, we just redid the whole street. 51 is not in really horrible shape. Granted, when you drive in, you're going to see some cake farms, other than planting very tall pine trees. I don't know how you can do that. But as far as infrastructure, the only thing that, you and I have talked about that, getting an exit off the interstate.
Right.
Is that all been settled? Is it too late?
Well, you folks had me come in, before I even got elected, I was still serving as the CDA chair and came and met with your CDA. And I work, I do a few things, but one of the things I do is work in transportation. And so I know some folks at DOT, and I've talked to them. What the situation is this. If you're within a mile of another interchange, they won't touch it. Federal DOT regs won't allow them. You're outside that mile. You went and actually drove it and got it. I'm talking about the 12, 18, the Beltline interchange. So you're outside that mile. I think we looked at a couple different options. Was it A, B, and some single count? So you're outside that, and I've talked with one of your trustees here, Scott, and I've talked to Brad about this. And actually, I think we have another meeting next week with DOT and Scott. It's doable, and I've had conversations with people in the Secretary's office at DOT where there could be some partnership there. They helped out a bit in Fitchburg, but that was not deemed a needed access point, an exit interchange. Fitchburg TIF'd that. They determined that it was needed for their economic development. So it's not a done deal as far as the possibility of being closed out. It's just whether or not the village wants to step up and make that investment. Now, I don't believe that's currently in the village boundaries, though, if I'm correct. Is that not in a township out there? So you've got some other discussions you would need to have as far as that potential partnership. And I don't know where Madison plays into this because they border that town on the other side. But it's an opportunity that I can't, I'm sounding like a broken record, aggressive. Is one where, be it Tom Metcalf, Rob Cull, or Bob Miller, whoever the mayor of Monona would be jumping after that opportunity, because that's a logical place to gain your visibility and access to grow the community from an economic development standpoint. You don't have that visibility from the Beltline that Monona has, with an easy access on and off. You're not far away, but it's not the same. And with this expansion of the interstate, and I represent all that area of the city of Madison. I mean, I think you're going to start to see the east side here develop, and I'm certainly pushing that, like you saw the west side develop a decade or so ago. It's just a logical place for people to want to pursue around DATCAP, et cetera, over there. Well, they aren't going to look at an option in the area we're talking about if there's not easy, accessible, good transportation access. It just isn't going to happen. So I've had quite a few discussions with DOT, but the village is going to have to be the one that wants that. And you want it, I'll help facilitate it and do what I can, see if I can help get some state resources. There's various programs that DOT has in place that could maybe be helpful. But again, most of those geared after job creation. But they helped out Fitchburg a bit. But Fitchburg bit off the lion's share there and did that themselves. And we did Monona Drive hoping that we'd get federal, state money, did all those applications, but we had made the determination long ago we were going to do it no matter what. If we can get that assistance, great. And we did. We ended up getting some assistance because of various traffic needs, high crash rates and so forth, but we were doing it no matter what. It had to happen. And we're obviously benefiting from that now in Monona. Yeah, you're right. Your Stoughton Road situation, there's maybe some things you can do once you come over the hill, down towards the bank, et cetera, to kind of identify the downtown more. That's all things you can work with Vanderwall or other consultants that will tell you how to do that for nominal costs. Your other area of potential growth, I think, is that east side. Farwell and the downtown area, it's not really an infrastructure issue. I think it's more creating the sense for developers of this is where they want to be. I mean, there's just this, Middleton's had it for a while, Verona's had it, Fitchburg has had it. Monona's just come into it in the last few years, this aura of for developers, retailers, I want to be there. And now they're calling because they want to be there. You have to create that buzz. It just doesn't happen. And you create the buzz by doing things that catch their attention, and that's making big investments. I mean, in the district I represent, Fitchburg is ahead of McFarland. It's ahead of Monona. It's a different situation in many regards, but they have just been wildly aggressive in doing their things and wildly successful because of that aggressiveness.
Any other questions?
Pat, could you speak to, maybe give an example of a partnership that the village, or excuse me, the city of Monona had with a local bank in putting a project together in the city of Monona?
Well, we've had several, and Rob may want to chime in on this too, because I'll speak specifically to the Garden Circle development that was referred to earlier. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, it was a blighted apartment complex behind Ken's on Monona Drive. City purchased it in order to do something like that. The city didn't have $6.5 million of cash on hand. So for a short-term loan, we went to a local bank, Monona State Bank, and got a short-term loan on that until we could, go out and to bonding and take care of it for, through financing. So that's an example of the bank coming on board. And then after that, when the new project was built, we got the developer connected to both local banks, where he received some additional financing, and now I believe he's the largest depositor at one of our banks.
WPS.
Yeah, WPS Bank. So a major developer in the Midwest, Milo Pinkerton, who's done a lot of projects, recently just completed one in Middleton also. I believe he's working in Madison, is the largest depositor in WPS Bank. So I think that's a good example. As Representative Call also noted, we do partner with both local banks in our Renew Monona program, our housing program. We currently have about 35 loans that are either currently open or have been closed through that process, though the money is turning over. The good thing about the low interest rates now is that people are refinancing, and at time of refinance, they need to pay back the city that investment we gave them. So we're seeing that money turn over, and we can give it to other families, other households in the community. So I think that's another great example of a partnership.
I had a question. In terms of Monona, what people do you have in place? Are you the main contact? I mean, you have a mayor structure, which is quite different than what we have, but on the staff side, what's the structure, besides you and the mayor?
It's very similar to what you have in McFarland with Mr. Peterson. It's the mayor is the chairman of the board in Monona, and I'm sort of the chief operating officer if you look at it from a business perspective. I am the day-to-day contact for economic development. My title is city administrator and economic development director. So I'm the primary contact. We have a city planner who is the assistant economic development director, and that individual, we partner and we work together in terms of staffing the Plan Commission, the Zoning Board of Appeals, and every other committee that facilitates either residential or business growth in the community. So it's not a large staff. As was mentioned earlier, we have a very active CDA and a lot of great volunteers in the community that make these things happen, and so that's important too. But basically 2 staff people.
It really started with Tom Metcalf and myself and now Bob. The mayor's position in Monona has really turned into the chief cheerleader and economic development person. That's the, or I should say, chief part of your job. Go out, keep the current businesses happy, attract new ones, spur economic development. I mean, that was 80% of what I spent my time on, because that generated the revenue to be able to clear the snow off the street and do the other things you need to do. And Pat really, his job title changed here in the last couple of years because it was a primary part of his job too. Conversely, Fitchburg's got a full-time economic development person, Mike Zimmerman, I think that's the right one, and he's very good. And that's why there's other advantages they have as far as land, availability, those things. But Mike's aggressively out there. That's all he does. And the mayor position in Monona is a part-time job. And so you really could do it just when you could get around to it. Pat's got a lot of other things on his plate as the administrator, so it can't be his main focus. But that would just it has become the expectation since Tom, which goes back to the 90s, that if you're the mayor in Monona, you're going to bring business in. You've got to go out there and be the salesperson.
And I think that when I mentioned earlier, we had meetings at 7 a.m. over coffee or in the evenings or at lunch. That's the reason why. Rob, when he was the mayor, and Bob Miller now, it requires a full-time job to feed your family. And so we'd have to meet at strange times, and that's just part of the job of being mayor in Monona.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the TIF checkbook. Don't meet you at strange times.
Yeah.
And so no one ever complained, but that's how you did it. I mean, our Monona Drive meetings were at 7 o'clock in the morning, and we were done by 8:15, 8:30 because a lot of us had to get to our regular jobs.
Everybody seemed to be pretty supportive of the idea of infrastructure investment. That's something that probably is worth the risk, worth the money. That could mean a lot of different things. When we talk about beautification, certainly just as a resident, I'd love to be able to walk and have my family bike a lot of different places. There's a lot of ways you could go. But just for anybody on the Hill, what's either what you feel is the biggest need, what you feel would be the biggest bang for the buck, where do you start?
Well, the biggest bang for your buck is going to be building that interchange if you can work something out, without question. But there are other things. You mentioned bike trails. I look at Fitchburg, where in the last decade, they've created this identity through investments. And they've got a lot of money with the state. There's programs out there of this biking destination. I mean, you drive down the Beltline now, there's this huge overpass built just for bikes. You get a lot of people in this area that want to commute to work on their bike if they can, but they certainly want to get out at night during the summer and on weekends and get and bike around. You've got some great trails in this area already. There's some connections you could build to those. Obviously, you benefit greatly from abundance of water around here, and people love to bike around that. I mean, you see that all the time, biking around Lake Monona. I think if you made those a focus of yours, you'd get some response. I would think some good response. I mean, it's been quite startling to me to see the attention Fitchburg's gotten for the investment they've made in that biking infrastructure. It is quite impressive. And it's, like I said, now it's part of their identity. They were on Discover Wisconsin a couple months ago, and that was the reason they're on there, was focus on what the biking has done for their economy.
Scott, I think if I could kind of echo what Bill said earlier, I think if we could see a little bit more dedication to the downtown area. I know that the gazebo is a nice amenity, and with the TIF district there's been some improvements, but it'd be nice to see the village put a little more emphasis on, I think, really reinvigorating that area. I think what Bill said here is that, having the heart and soul of McFarland and really having that downtown and the history there, I think if we could incorporate that somehow and really make that a destination again, I think that'd be very beneficial for the community.
It also seems we may have a problem with Milwaukee Street closing down too. Where there's a problem, there could also be some opportunity to extend that from the gazebo, I mean, use your imagination. Splash Park, I mean, there's, McFarland School District has one of the best swim programs in the state. And they have way outgrown their pool, they've way outgrown their auditorium for their arts and, drama department. So things like this, what I'd like to see is a collaborative effort. So we're not piecemealing for this group to, have this building maybe, and at the end, we really have nothing that's tied together. All these little piecemeal kind of type things, it doesn't seem to work. It doesn't mean that we have to do everything all at once, but that we can get a general consensus, a general plan, get people excited, get the cheerleaders going, do the marketing plan, and put some of this stuff together. I know, Pauline, there's lots of plans that say a lot of that kind of stuff, that have been going on. I think it's just time that we push.
The infrastructure, Pat and I both failed to mention, Ahuska Park, right on the belt line there, on Broadway, that's a TIF park. I mean, instead of doing economic development there, we made a concerted effort to make that a community investment. And it's now right with Winnequa Park, the most popular park in the city, baseball, pee-wee football, soccer, tennis, our farmers market, the Veterans Memorial, Dane County Veterans Memorial's there. Now you have the events like the chili cook-off, there's other things that are moving. We never thought we would fill that parking lot up, and we struggle now because it's filled all the time.
We're actually looking to add additional parking there, and it's a huge economic development. The flow of having soccer tournaments there and baseball tournaments there and football games, the businesses all on that Broadway corridor really feed off of that, as well as the hotels.
Yeah, I mean, because you get tournaments in, they all stay at the hotel, they want to eat at Red Robin, Buffalo Wild Wing, Starbucks, and all those guys, they benefit. That was part of the thought process. Again, you build it, they're going to come. And those, building it to attract the visitors. And to certainly accommodate the residents who wanted some facilities to utilize themselves.
Other questions? I'll throw another one at you. You were talking about plans that you have. Were you referring to your TIF district, the TIF plan, or are you referring to sub-plans within the district, or both, and you were trying to sell them to both the business community and the residents?
Yeah, I mean, you put together a project plan for your TIF districts. And sometimes, as Pat said, we had to partner with the bank to buy the Garden Circle area. We didn't have anybody lined up. It was about to fall back in the hands of the original owner, who was just going to rent it back out and go back to creating the problem we had before. So that was, again, talk about being aggressive. That was it wasn't a difficult decision. I just knew it could be a blow up in our face because we had nobody lined up. That's pretty rare. But we went out, held it, went out and got proposals and moved forward, and very successful development. Typically what you do is you conceptually put together an idea for area. We work with Gary Becker. And so he does those for us. Sometimes, obviously, it works the other way too, where developers come to you. But when I got elected, I circled, I think there was 5 spots in Monona. The trailer park, which has been approved for development on the water there, just waiting to break ground. Garden Circle, the spot where the Walmart is, because that was a vacant storefront. The trailer park, the salvage yard, which has been cleared now and is for sale on Broadway. And then we had the storage facility, which is now Meritor, so it was 5 spots. So you've got to figure out where you can't do everything and be everything to everybody. So this was before Pat came on board. The prior administrator already circled those 5 on a map and said, before I'm done, we're going to get these things taken care of. And we did on one level or another. Either got them cleared, ready for sale, et cetera. And you've got to work with the property owners. We didn't own any of those until we bought the Garden Circle one. Everyone else is you work with the developer, come in with a conceptual plan, or tell them what could or could not work there. I mean, just a year before the Meritor deal came together, that property owner came to us and said, well, I just want to convert this to inside cold storage, et cetera. instead of the limited office use he had there besides the outside storage. We said no. Sometimes you gotta say no. Say that doesn't work in our plan. You know, what we see there at that corner of Stoughton Road and Broadway with Beltline visibility is not a storage facility. And I'm sorry, but you have the ability as a village to say no. It's just not in the best interest of your community. So yeah, we did a lot of, we have a Broadway corridor plan and we have a Monona corridor plan. Not everything falls in line exactly of, you know, because somebody will say, well, you had planned retail office in this area. Well, maybe senior housing was the opportunity that presented itself, and that's what's going to go there. It still works. But it's good to have those plans. So yeah, we had plans for both corridors. Those are the main corridors, and that's what we had in place. And we paid consultants to do that. There's another area of town where there's been some planning put in place, and MG&E paid for it.
This question is for Pat, but you and Rob kind of touched on it. I'm a firm believer of, like Robin just said, you can't be everything to everybody. I think we need to embrace what we have. I think one of the things we have a problem with is the Highway 51 corridor. As you said, you drive into town, and it basically says, get a burger, get gas, and get out. I don't think anyone's going to be interested, I personally wouldn't be interested in, oh, they've got it downtown, look what Highway 51 looks like. How do you, I mean, other than where the montage is, the building with the subway, and the McFarland State Bank, that area's got flow. Would something like the facade program that Monona had, and what would you say if you were in charge of McFarland, could do whatever you want on that corridor there, what would you like to see? Something to, I mean, because we've got some real old, clunky looking buildings that really don't say stop and shop.
We really haven't dictated per se. There's things out there like design guidelines. Pauline's well aware of those type of things, and where you require, you've all driven out on the interstate towards Milwaukee, and you see Heartland where all the businesses look alike off there. We don't require that in Monona, but what we do require, and we do have Monona Drive and Broadway design guidelines, is we require quality construction materials. So we don't allow pole barns, steel pole barns, and we don't allow, I don't know, open storage areas, things like that to be developed. They have to be quality building materials, whether that's, brick or stone or wood, something that's appealing, and our plan commission sticks by that. So I would think that would be a good first step, is to have that level of requirement if you don't already. Secondly, as Rob mentioned earlier, is to have an identity. Our identity as you enter Monona is that, first of all, it's that stone theme, that stone themed wall we're acquiring. We've acquired over the years, and the sales, and we're trying to bring that theme through the entire community. So whatever, McFarland decides is the identity, that's what you need to push and invest in on that corridor, would be my opinion.
Also, pylon signs not allowed in Monona, so some get grandfathered in, but eventually they all go away. It's a standard, and we've got a very good plan commission. And but I think it really started when Tom put up those sales, Tom Metcalf, and we were having some issues with them in the beginning when I became mayor. People wanted me to take them down. They were referred to as the bras in Monona, and we decided no, we're going to make a bigger investment and put in those stones, put in the lighting now. And now you see that theme carried through. So when Meritor put up their project, they incorporated into their sign the Monona signage, the theme. Monona State Bank did that at Bridge and Broadway. You see businesses now proud of it, and they want to incorporate it in what they do. But again, you got to make that an infrastructure investment yourself, and I consider that an infrastructure investment. Yeah, it was a huge capital cost. Those sales alone were a couple $100,000. Then you did all the landscaping, put the stone walls and the lighting and everything. I mean, that entrance feature is not cheap, but you're in Monona. It defines the community now. And it's all, the chambers incorporated it in their logo. Like I said, businesses all incorporated it. You've got to create that sense of pride, and the businesses are going to look for the village to start it. That's at least how it happened in Monona.
We actually got, if you can believe this or not, we got McDonald's is rebuilding on Monona Drive, and we got them to incorporate the Monona Drive stone into the frontage of their building. So, I mean, if you can get someone like that to come on board, you know your planning commission is doing the right things.
And if I may take that maybe a different direction here, as a business owner here in McFarland, I feel like with the new Walgreens there on the corner of 51, with the construction of Barry's Marina, and that's going to be redeveloped, I think that corridor is going to take care of itself. I mean, my opinion is, how can we look at some of the improvements that have already been made? Quick Trip recently renovated their facility. Angelo's there on Farwell Street has made renovations to that property. Spartan Bowl is still a metal facility, but they've done some upgrades as well. But you look beyond that, and there's some older buildings there. The old Siemens building, the laundromat, even the hardware store is aging. So how could we maybe put some facade work into those kinds of facilities and really kind of draw some attention away from that corridor and draw people down Farwell Street into the heart of the city and bring them closer to the school district, to downtown? Could we make investments in those types and work with those property owners to do that kind of work?
And sometimes, Monona's got some of the same struggles down across from the high school, some of those properties. CDA just buying them up. Tear them down, rent them out if they're still feasible, accumulate the property, wait for the opportunity to redevelop. But 3 or 4 buildings now the CDA's bought in the last few years. That's how the whole corner bridge and Broadway developed, Monona State Bank, et cetera. Tom Metcalf went out and bought an old PDQ building there and sat on it.
I'm going to go back to some of what you said, Tim, because I think the difference we have in McFarland is both Broadway and Monona Drive are carrying people in and out of Madison. McFarland doesn't have that with our downtown, and so what do we do with Farwell? Did we take people off of Highway 51, like Karen said? I mean, that carries people past McFarland. There's really not a reason for them to stop, other than, either get gas or get fast food or stuff at Walgreens. So what I'd like to see is some kind of a vision or branding from McFarland, so we build on what Bill has done. We've got the museum down there, we've got the library down there, but we still don't have anything to bring them down. So what does that do? How do businesses look at those kind of areas, and how can we bring businesses in when we don't have the traffic that will support their business?
Well, and I think trying to generate that traffic has really got to be the primary goal here. And, as Rob mentioned there, I mean, they just went and bought those properties. Now, I don't know if that's feasible for the village of McFarland, but, that Siemens building has been, for most intents and purposes, vacant. I mean, there's one business in there. The laundromat next door has been aging considerably for quite some time. So if it means working with the developer to try to redevelop those properties to make them attractive, to pull people off 51, and I think really then beyond that is a branding, a marketing campaign. How do we work as not just a business community, but a village to bring people into that city center area downtown? And as a chamber, we try and do that with some of our events. The Christmas in the Village, we're going to be having the bonfire in the lot adjacent to the McFarland House in a couple weeks. And, I think if we maybe expanded that to, we have the concerts on the pavilion on Thursdays. Maybe we could put something like the farmer's market, which has had trouble finding a home. Maybe we could put something like that in the village center. Something to just bring more people in. And then promotion. I mean, we have to promote it and promote the hell out of it and be aggressive, I think, like our counterparts in Monona have said.
Well, my question for Tim, I'm sure that everyone would agree with your concept of redevelopment, but literally right across the street from the property that you mentioned for years has been a sizable vacant lot, which would be a lot less expensive for someone to develop.
Which has also had a sizable price tag, if I'm not incorrect.
But not compared to redeveloping properties that you have to acquire them and tear them down to rebuild on site, or to significantly remodel them. And I only point that out as the challenge. Kate talked about the fact that you obviously have a lot more traffic and of a different nature when you're talking about Monona Drive and Broadway and so forth. Most of the traffic that we have on Far West Street are going to be local residents. It's not that it's not through traffic, and obviously we're not going to successfully do like it, pulling traffic off of Highway 51, just because there isn't very much to draw on.
And I'm not a property developer, so I can only give my opinion of it. But if I was a developer, I wouldn't want to spend a lot of money developing that open lot if right across the street there were some essentially dilapidated properties. I wouldn't want to make that investment. So I think that if we want to encourage someone to develop that land, we probably need to be proactive in addressing what's across the street first.
Well, I think you've also touched on one of the challenges in redevelopment, and that is property ownership. Unless you have people that are interested in doing something with the properties, or the community has the wherewithal to actually acquire the properties and hold it, or go out and seek proposals for development and so forth. The village plays more of a facilitation role rather than a proactive role. And those are discussions that we've had with the elected officials. And to date, as a community, we've not decided to be aggressively proactive in the economic development area, at least in my view.
And based on what you've heard, should we change that?
I don't know. I think at the present time, it might still be a little risky economically to go out in a big way, although the flip side of that is that you might be able to acquire properties if that was your objective. They were strategically located less expensively now because property values are still somewhat depressed. But there's been a lot of talk about Monona, and I think that they've done a wonderful job, but they're two very different types of communities, and I don't think there should be an expectation that McFarland is going to become as successful as Monona has been in business development. And we have a sense of what the percentage tax base split is between commercial and residential in Monona?
Yeah, it's probably about, well, it's right around 62% commercial.
62% commercial. McFarland is between 70 and 75% residential.
And I think if there's one theme that I've taken from tonight, Don, it's not that we should try and be what Monona is, and Monona has done amazing things, but we should try and be McFarland. And we should try and come up with a cohesive idea of what McFarland will be for the future. And I think that's going to take a lot of moving pieces getting together and a lot of cohesion from different entities, but I think we can do it.
Yeah, I don't think anyone really talked about Fargo being more than local and bringing, some kind of that was never brought up. I don't think that that's the point. I think it was more of a pride in this community and how are we, going to make it livable and sustainable in a place where families want to grow and increase the residential tax base and all that.
Well, I took copious notes. And my perception of what I was hearing was that, first off, saying that Monona didn't do this overnight. It was a long process. I used to live in Monona when he was mayor and was in on a lot of that. My perception of what I'm hearing is that we can either choose to stay exactly what we are, or we can choose to grow. We can choose to take perhaps some risk, and we can decide how much of a risk we wish to take. But if we don't do something, we are going to be eaten up alive around us. So to me, it comes down to a choice of, are we going to go forward? And it may need to be steps that the village can afford. But if we don't take any risks, when I first started my speaking business and I tried to get my business off the ground, I was told by a professional, you can't afford not to spend some money if you want to do this. So we can't afford not to take a few risks if we want anything in the future. That was my perception.
So be aggressive?
I do think we have to be. And we have to create, I heard how many times, I believe 4 or 5 times, we had to create the buzz, and we had to provide options and create some various partnerships. So I think we as a village, we have the power to do that, and we have some great people, and we have great things to offer, so I think we need to go for it.
There's some simple things you can do. Bring in the known developers in this area. Walk around the areas that we've been talking about. We did this. It's what we did. We continue to do it every day in Monona. What do you see here? What do you have in your pipeline that might work here? What should we do to attract people here? And they may give you answers you don't want to hear, but you're going to have to hear them. And then you have to spend some money. You're going to have to pay the consultants that will give you the plan. And in Monona, that meant having meetings down at the high school where you invited a bunch, everybody could be invited to community meetings, and then you had some strategic people from the school district, the business community, et cetera. Everybody starts giving their input, put a bunch of stickies on the wall. And you remember, Pat's been in these, I've been in these. It's these community input meetings to figure out what you want for your community. And that's how you do it. That will cost you some money. I don't recall what those studies cost us, but that creates your corridor plans. For you, you might have one plan, or you might have a couple of different areas, obviously, that have different identities within the village. But the first part is just getting some of these guys in here to give you a candidate assessment for free. That's what we did. But then you pay for these consultants to tell you what get the input and then give you a path to get there.
I agree with what Rob and Pat had said about how you have to be aggressive. But I also agree with what Don said. I don't agree with his position, but it's a truism in McFarland that there are a lot of people who don't want to see this community grow. That's a truism. And I'm all for that if our largest employer doesn't want to give any raises. If those 300 employees at the school district don't want raises, I'm okay with not growing.
Well, and Dave, I grew up in McFarland, and my perception for the longest time has been that it's not that we don't want to grow, but we're not looking to become the next outlet for big box stores. But how can we grow in a healthy manner with maybe small retail and small commercial down that Farwell corridor into the downtown area, perhaps? I mean, I think if we look at that as an alternative to trying to encourage the next big box.
Anybody that wants big box, there's no place to put one.
Yeah, well, and that's part of the problem, but, I mean, that's always been the perception of mine in McFarland, is that we want to maintain that small town environment and that feel. I think there's ways that we can do that and still grow.
Well, I think Monona's done that fairly well. I mean, the only big box they had was one, Southtown, I suppose, and Walmart. The rest of it is big. How many businesses did you say? I mean, those are all small businesses.
Over 200 businesses. I've got 2 sons that live here in McFarland. I'm basically from Indiana up until June of this year when I moved to McFarland. And Brad was good enough, he put me on 3 different committees here because I was strictly involved. Dude, I just got out of the hospital, my voice was dead. But what I've found in talking to people in the community here is 2 or 3 perceptions of the village and its board and its members. Number one, a lot of people think they're anti-business. They don't really go after the businesses. They think it's just a retirement community to Madison. And this is the big public opinion on the streets. Between those 2 things, if you're not into economic development, you're not into creating businesses, it's just not going to happen. The facades downtown, like you said, picking those up, that vacant lot is a perfect example. I'm like you, I would never buy that property and develop if I had a bum store across the street from it. It just wouldn't make sense because I'm not going to draw traffic to a new place if the old places look like crap. No bottom line. And I know I've only been here 6 months. I'm learning a lot about McFarland. I enjoy McFarland, but it does have some problems that have to be solved. Somebody's got to solve them. That's the bottom line. That's why you guys are here. That's why we're here.
the other thing, you guys may not, I mean, this is good timing for you, but you have a situation we never had to deal with in Monona. Monona has been for a long time landlocked by the city of Madison and by the water. That's not the case here. And I represent 4 towns. 2 of them already have their boundary agreements with Madison, Blooming Grove and the town of Madison, to be taken over by Madison within the next 10 to 15 years. Your hand may be forced by the city of Madison. And I represent part of the city of Madison, part that would incorporate some of those towns potentially. So I'm not picking sides or anything. I'm just, there's many differences between the two, Monona and McFarland. That's a big one. You know, that if you don't do certain things, rest assured Madison isn't going to, Madison learned its lesson with Fitchburg about 25 years ago. You ever look on a map and see how big Fitchburg is? It's huge, because the mayor at that time went and grabbed a bunch of land, won the Supreme Court case against Madison, and now it's just unbelievable the amount of land they have there. A lot of it's still farmland. Madison learned from that, and they can't really go to the west with Middleton. Sun Prairie has come down from the north. Where do you think they might look to go? And that's something that it's not going to force your hand per se, but something you guys need to keep in mind. Because the towns in this area, in that particular area I'm thinking of, I'm sure that, I don't even know if they might already have some discussions underway with Madison, I don't know. So that would play into that whole interchange of the interstate. Madison's going to have to be at that table. So it's just something to think about. The other thing is, what you do can actually help your bottom line. We tripled the size of our rainy day fund. Our bond rating went up to the highest it can be for a municipality our size. Well, we did all this because we were making money. And that meant money to do other things. More economic development, more services for the community, et cetera. I want people to leave this with the impression that Monona's just throwing money out the window buying land. We're very strategic, and we did it to improve the community, but also we did it like a bank board will make a decision. We wanted some return. It's not our money, it's the taxpayers' money. So this can be a windfall in some regards too, especially when you consider the state, not me, my colleagues across the aisle of the state are putting more and more pressure on you in the local government. I'm looking to the elected people here with levy caps and so forth. Now they're going to count fees in that ratio. This is a way for you to generate revenue too.